Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. The 92-year-old woman at the nursing home received a visit from one of her fellow church members. "How are you feeling?" the visitor asked. "Oh, I am just worried sick," the woman replied. "Well, what are you worried about?" her visitor asked. "You look like you're in good health, and they are taking good care of you, aren't they?" "Oh, yes," she replied, "they are taking care of me." "Well," the visitor continued, "are you in any pain?" "No, I've never had a day of pain in my life." "Well, then, what are you worried about?" her friend asked finally. The woman leaned forward in her chair and said in a quiet voice, "Every close friend I have ever had has already died and gone on to heaven. I'm afraid they're all wondering where I went." Heaven is, I think, the place we all want to go. Newsweek magazine published a poll a few years back revealing that 94% of Americans believe that God exists and 77% of Americans believe that there is a heaven. Perhaps an even more interesting result of the poll is that while 77% believe that there is a heaven, 76% believe that they have a good or excellent chance of getting there. It would seem that if you believe in heaven at all, you expect to get there. And heaven is, without a doubt, the place we all want to go. But what will heaven be like? That's a question that people have sought to answer for centuries, and even now there is no clear agreement. We are bombarded with so many conflicting images of heaven and what life in heaven will be like that it becomes impossible to sort through them all or ever to arrive at a definitive answer. Even the Bible seems confused, describing heaven in different ways at different times. There are many ideas about heaven and what it will be like. Perhaps the most prevalent idea about heaven throughout our society is something that I like to call the Wizard of Oz approach. In this view, heaven is seen as a great, jewel-studded city with buildings of emerald and streets of gold and gates of pearl with fields of flowers surrounding it on all sides, with a glorious sun shining down its warmth and light. For many people, this view is not unlike the city of Oz, which Dorothy and Toto and the others tried so desperately to reach. Step by step, they followed the yellow brick road, watching for lions and tigers and bears, and getting into trouble whenever they veered from the path. For many Christians, heaven is that great and glorious city that you reach by following the straight and narrow path. And if you depart from that path, nothing but sorrow and trouble await you. Now, there's much to commend this view of heaven. Indeed, this seems to be exactly how John describes the New Jerusalem in the closing chapters of Revelation. He saw a celestial city full of jewels and shining with the glory of God. And for many, this is a meaningful way to think about heaven. They picture themselves within that city, rewarded by the wealth, fulfilled in God's glory. Another prominent idea about heaven is that heaven will be just like it is here on earth, only there will be no pain. Life will be very similar in heaven to life on earth, according to this theory. Only there will be no illness, no disease, no heartache, no sorrows, no loneliness, no war, no handicaps or disabilities. Everything and everyone will be made perfect and whole. For many people, a view of heaven as something familiar is very comforting, and they look forward to life after death as an opportunity to resume and continue the pleasant things of earthly life. For many others, heaven will be a place of pure pleasure. I knew a golfer once who was so enamored of the game that he was convinced that heaven will be a lush green golf course where he will be able to slice and hook and drive and putt to his heart's content. For many people, a view of heaven like that is very appealing. It's nice to think that in heaven we will be able to enjoy to the fullest what we most enjoy now. Golf, reading, singing, walking, whatever brings us pleasure here. That will be how heaven is. Perhaps another favorite view of heaven, and one of the most biblical, is that in heaven there will be a great continuing wedding banquet. Jesus himself seems to draw that picture of heaven. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, Jesus describes the rich man enduring the torment of hell, starving and thirsty, and then looking up to heaven, and he sees Lazarus before a great feast. In another parable, Jesus describes a king who gives a wedding feast, and the important people who were invited did not come, but the doors are then opened to beggars and the average person on the street. Again and again, Jesus describes heaven as a banquet, a place of feasting and rejoicing. No doubt many of you have heard the story of the visitor to heaven and hell. It seems that a man once went to sleep thinking about heaven and hell and dreamed that he visited both places. In hell, he saw many people seated before a long banquet table with a great feast spread out, ready to eat. But in hell, the people had no elbows, so their arms couldn't bend in order to feed themselves. And so there they sat, staring eternally at something they desired, but could never have. In heaven, he saw exactly the same thing. There were many people seated at a banquet table loaded with food. These people, too, had no elbows, yet they sat at the table laughing, happy, full of joy. For you see, in heaven, each one fed the person across from him. A great banquet is a popular view of heaven, and even Jesus seemed to think of heaven in those terms. Another important biblical image of heaven is that of a great throne room of judgment. Jesus described heaven in this way as he told another parable of the day of judgment, where there would be a division, left and right, goats and sheep, and the goats would be cast into the lake of fire, and the sheep would be brought into paradise. Many other biblical writers share this view as well. Heaven is often described as God's courtroom, with his throne high and lifted up, with angels and archangels and all the company of heaven singing his praises. It's a grand vision, one that commands our attention, and it is one that sometimes causes us fear as we wonder on which side of the division we will be. None of us can say which, if any, of these views of heaven is correct. And in fact, I think we can probably be pretty sure that none of them are completely right. But that Newsweek survey about heaven revealed two other interesting things. First, most of us expect that in heaven we will meet our family and friends. In heaven, we believe we will be reunited with those who were important to us here on earth. In heaven, we believe that we will enjoy again the love and support of those we care about and know. I think that will be one of the greatest joys of being there. The second thing is this. Most of us also expect that in heaven we will meet God. That's a little more difficult for many of us. According to sociologist Andrew Greeley, meeting God takes a back seat to reunions with family and friends for most people, because most people have never met God. They don't know what God is like, so it's hard to imagine meeting him on the street of the celestial city and what that would be like. It's hard to imagine a love that surpasses our understanding. It's hard to imagine a being of such power and grace. And maybe the secret here is to begin to look for God around us now. Maybe we should expect to see God now, not just in heaven, but now all around us, acting in our lives, giving us love and power and grace all the time. God's there, you know. God is all around us, waiting to be recognized and heard and seen, seeking to encounter us, seeking to be known. In heaven, we will meet God and find there the same God of love and joy that we have always known. My friends, there is a heaven, and it waits for us. And maybe it's enough for now simply to say that we should live our lives such that we don't have to be like that old lady, worried about our friends wondering where we went. What will heaven be like? There are many ideas. But one thing is sure. through the love of Jesus, we will be invited to find out. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.